Hello, tubers. Hey, I thought maybe you'd want to see what projects I'm working on here lately. And anyway, this car here is a 2000 Pontiac, and I bought it last summer. I bought it pretty cheap. It needed a lot of work. The engine is LS1, and I preferred it because it had the throttle cable set up versus the drive-by-wire system. Now this is the exact same engine that comes in the Corvette except for that. And I did a lot of work to the engine already. I probably should have made a movie of that, but I didn't. And anyway, I thought I'd show you what I'm up to now. Now this car came with a 6-speed transmission. If you have an American-made car with a 6-speed, it's probably going to be this one here. It's called a T56 Borg-Warner or Tremec. The problem with these is the blocker rings go bad for first and second gear, and then it's next to impossible, even with a double clutch, to get it into gear. Now here are the parts that I ordered for the transmission. And then here they have a rebuild kit with bearings, seals, and rings. Now first and second gear has your carbon fiber style ring for first and second, and then reverse has a brass one yet, and third and fourth, fifth and sixth have more of your traditional, but they still have some of your trick lining in them. They have an upgrade for third and fourth with a steel shift fork, and then also I wanted to do the first and second hub slider and third and fourth. That's a fairly easy transmission to work on, other than the only thing you had to have a specialty tool that I ran into was your exciter ring for the speedometer, which is on a tail shaft. So kind of just made something up here quick to get that off. The reason why I bought this car, I wanted the engine and transmission for my red Chevy Nova. The thing that turned me on about buying this car is everything was original. The guy never did nothing to it. For as far as then, you know, the plug holes won't be bad and the connectors aren't going to be broke, stuff like that. Now he said the only thing he had done to it was he had a water pump done and had a clutch put in it. Well, let me show you something. Now when you're underneath the car, look at the tunnel here, and by judging by all these marks, they didn't do real well at getting the transmission lined up and back in properly. Now once I took that apart, where the pilot bearing rides on the transmission nose here, what I found was this is supposed to be a bearing, and it's supposed to look like this guy right here on the inside. You can see that. Anyway, they must have kept jamming it, and they smashed out all the rollers in here, and this is all that was left of it. I had to use a die grinder to nip it lightly to get this all pulled out of there. Also, it wrecked the nose on the tranny, and you can see the ring in here yet where a couple of the bearings must have been diggering on it, so I had to polish this all out. Now if you go somewhere to get your car fixed, a lot of times the lower bid, they're cutting corners. Here's what you're going to run into. Behind the flywheel is the rear main seal. That was also leaking. That wasn't replaced. It's not that much more work to get that out of there. Also, the clutch slave, this is driven by hydraulic fluid from the clutch master, which is connected to the clutch pedal. This was not replaced either. When you open this up, a lot of fluid will run down inside your bell housing area here. What I've done on this replacement one is, this is 1/4 inch by 28 bleeder screw here. Tap will fit right down in here without even drilling. And then I heated it up with solder on it, and it gave it the last 1/8 inch turn in tighter before it cooled. Now also on these, they have different grades. This one here is the all aluminum one. This is the one that I prefer. The other ones I have had problems with. Just thought I'd pass that along to you too. Well, I have a lot of the parts cleaned up now, so we're going to start assembling some things. On this input shaft here, I already have the bearing pressed off, and then I take some, oh, hang on here, I'll show you. These Scotch-Brite red pads work real good for polishing where the seal rides and before I press the bearing on. Also, before I press the bearing on, I always use some Moly EP on here, and the bearings press on a little bit easier. Well, I better get back to work. I'll show you as the progress goes along. I got a few more things to clean up, and hopefully this should be pretty much sewed together today. Here's a neat little trick for you. You ever got to get a bearing off and you don't have a puller, or you can't get behind it with your puller that you do have? What I always do, you cut the cage off and then take a grinder. Grind what's left of the bearing that's on the shaft. Give it a couple whacks with a chisel sometimes, that helps. And you can pretty much so tap it right off, and if it does split, you can actually slide it right off with your fingers. Now, before we go any further, I'm going to give you a peek at what goes wrong with these. Now, this here is part of what would be in the main case on the transmission. Your fourth gear, which is just a straight through on here. This gear here is just used for the cluster. So that collar slides down, that would be fourth gear. When the collar goes up onto this gear, that's third gear. Here we have second, and first goes on the top up here, which I'm going to show you in a second. Your first gear and second gear, by the way, are the only ones that they use this on. The reason being, when you have a 6-speed transmission and all this mass turning, they're clutching it by two surfaces, the inner and the outer, not just the one surface like a regular synchro ring would be. Now, up here I have first gear laying. I wanted to show you the gap with the old blocker ring installed right here. And as you can see, that's supposed to be 20/1000ths of an inch. There's not much of a gap there. That blocker ring is definitely junk. Now, let's get the new one in here. And as you can see, check out the difference on there. Now you can see how much that blocker ring is worn. And anyway, when you do one of these, that's the part that goes wrong with them, in case you'd like to know that. Unfortunately, you got to take everything all apart to replace that ring. Originally, this had an aluminum 3/4 shift fork in it, and there has been an upgrade for the steel one. Now, if a few of you folks plan on doing one of these, I'll show you a neat little tip here that you should know and save you hours of frustration. This little fork right here is 4 reverse. This is 5th and 6th. This is 3rd and 4th, and we got 1st and 2nd right here. Now, this piece here rotates, and then this shaft here slides with a pin on it that shifts all these forks. Now, I have it in 4th gear right now. There's a pin that's on that shaft, and I don't know if you could really see it, but anyway, I've run a shaft down, and it is in 4th gear. That way all of these here stay stable. Now, there's support pins. This is for your horizontal, and this one here is for your vertical, as I'm showing it here, to support the shift rods. Now, once you set this case on, what you do is look in these holes here. And these are your guide pins that go in these holes. And if you look in here, you can see that that vertical one is lined up with that slide in there. And if you look in the other one, your horizontal one here, you can see that white mark that I've put in there. And that way you know for sure you got them alignment pins going in where they should be. When you're just starting to set the case on, this is your detent. Your ball goes in here, and that's your guide for your H pattern in the transmission. As you're setting the case on, you got to have this in the hole and started with that little ball in it. You put a little trans gel on it, start it as you walk the case down. Well, I have the cluster gear installed, and we're all set up here and ready to install the case. I have a thin film of sealant around here. Right stuff is what I use for this type of job. You don't want to put too much on, or it can ooze out and break off and cause problems. Well, this is kind of a two-person job, but let's see if we can get her together here. Here's the tricky part. Going good. Cool. And we're good on that one. How about him? Run dead center. Good. I have them shaft guide pins and some red Loctite on them. And you're not going to be able to get these out without breaking a Torx bit. So you do take a propane torch, heat them for maybe about a minute, and when you're disassembling, they'll come right out. Okay, let's continue here. Of course, clean all your bolts before you reassemble. And then when you use the torque wrench, you'll have accurate torque. Okay, let's flip her over and finish that part up. Let's get torqued to 35 Newton meters. Start out a little light at first, let it walk in by itself. Once you're all done, you want a nice tiny bead of sealant, as you can see, not too carried away. I thought I'd be a little more specific on this. This is your shift guide, your shift pattern up here. Now this part here that I had to set in when I was dropping the case on, it has a detent on the bottom half of this here. There's a spring and a ball in here. I had to set it up for gear number 4, which would be the next one over from this slot right here. Now also on that ball and spring, make sure you put a bunch of trans gel on there and then it don't get away on you. Put that roll pin in. It would actually be easier if you put yourself a punch in there and then pull it out of 4th gear, and then you got a little more free play to eyeball to get that hole exact before you start putting the roll pin in. Okay, the tail housing is ready to go on, and here we have reverse idler gear. Here is reverse gear, and then we have 5th and 6th down in here. And of course, the 5th and 6th rings and reverse have been replaced. These are the keys that go inside those block assemblies. And this is the bearing off the rear output shaft. To get this tail housing on, you're going to encounter 2 problems. One is the reverse idler gear won't line up. So you got to turn the input shaft a little bit, and then that'll drop on for that part. The next step is the shift shaft here for this end is not going to go into the hole on the case. So you're going to have to push this in a little bit, and then you can drop the tail right on. Now for the sealant, all you need is a tiny line along the case here, and then you smear it in with your finger to level it out. Alright, let's get that tail housing on. And there you have it. We're on a case several times to get the bolts near to the torque spec, and then finally give them the 35 Newton meter torque. Now this is my transmission jack here. What this is a piece of water pipe that I machined up so it'll fit in here in exchange with the handle this comes with. Put a knurl on there, and while I have the pipe cap on here, this is filled with lead weights in here. So when you're under a car, the handle won't come back up by itself. Now, on this pad here, this has been around for a long time, and you can anchor your transmissions however you need to onto this wood board here. And then I got some 220 sandpaper on the top here. Now, it's offset, so you always use the short end when you go to, you put this up at a bell housing when you go to take a transmission out. And the longer end here, when you have a transfer case with a transmission and that, you can put blocks on here or whatever you have to, or you can screw them on, bolt them on, whatever, to assist, to keep the thing steady so it don't bite you on the way out. Now to mount this to the jack, here's what I have. I have 2 1/4-inch bolts that are countersunk in here with some washers on them. And so they don't fall out of there, I got some nylock nuts on them. So you have to go look for some bolts each time you want to use it. And then all you got to do is drill 2 holes in your pad here and tap them with your 1/4-inch tap, and then this will always just screw right on without having to have any nuts or anything on the back side. The other nice thing too is when this is mounted, where the pad wiggles, you can actually tip to assist you with the transmission install. Couple more tips to pass along here. On your drive shaft, clean off that nose on the yoke. Now, take some, that red Scotch-Brite works real good. If you got a whole bunch of rust right here, and then you shove that shaft in to where the new seal is, it kind of rips the heck out of it. So, good idea to clean that off and lube it before install. And on your shaft here, where the clutch disc rides, clean that off real good with a wire brush, and then put lubricant of some kind on there. So that way, keep it real light, but that way the clutch pulls from one side, and you always want the disc to recenter and float freely in there. If you don't do that, you can have a little bit of a clutch drag. Now then, it's going to make your transmission go to crap sooner. So, good idea there, and also put some lube on for the pilot bearing. Well, tubers, it's time for a test drive. By the way, I left it run on the hoist for a little bit to stir the oil in good before we get our test drive in. Okay, right now I'm heading for an area where usually it's pretty quiet. And the main problem with this transmission, like I said, was when you come to a dead stop. You couldn't get it in gear. And through the years I drove some really rough transmissions, and you could always double clutch, or there's always a workaround. And on this one, there just wasn't. So see how it works now. Hopefully nobody's down here. Alright, let's come to a stop here. And here's where the problem always came in. You couldn't get it in first or second. We'll try first. Oh, I like that. Oh, nice and crisp with them new rings. Yeah, the 4-way stop sign. There's a few times where I came up to him. I got a little rough with the shifter. He, to try to get back into first is real aggravating, and actually a few times he even took off in second. That worked a little better in first. Oh my! I like this now. This is nice. Now, you folks too, you get 100,000 or so on a car, it ain't a bad idea to change the transmission fluid. Depending on what kind of operator a vehicle's had, that's where the difference comes in. on how long things last. Oh, hey, a quick tip for you too. You got ignition on an older car, it's starting to wear a little bit. Take a can of WD-40 when the key is out, give it a oink in where the key goes in, and I guarantee you'll never replace this ignition lock assembly. Key works better at everything all the way around. Yeah, when I bought this car, I had to drive it probably 30 some miles to get home with it. And that little bit of driving took a quarter of a tank of fuel. That'll give you an idea how crappy this was running when I bought it. Now you can run this thing right down in the RPMs, and the motor don't matter at all. It'll still take right off, even though we are in 5th gear now. We're all tweaked and tuned. I did have one of them tuner programs where I did do a lot of work on this. The car actually, out of the box, idles after it's warm at 800 RPMs. And I really don't care for that. I set it up to 550 right off the bat. That was the first thing I did with that tuner program. But yeah, you can change a lot of stuff with them. They're really nice. We got some cars coming, but we can get out of their way. Oh, that's fun. Second to 6th. Yeah, a lot of times when I'm driving, I skip gears instead of doing 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, whatever. A lot of times I'll go 1st, 3rd, 5th, stuff like that. Just because you got them all don't mean you need them. Well, anyway, let's head her back. Real happy with this one, folks. Yeah, I started putting some of the tools away before stuff. I thought, yeah, maybe we should just try it out first. But anyway, yeah. Hey, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the ride along here. Hope you enjoyed the video. Like I said, leave a comment or ask a question, whatever. But anyway, thanks for stopping by. Take care. Question: can a piece of 4-inch exhaust tubing with a 30-degree elbow on it be formed into a cold air intake which has a round opening on one end and an oval on the other?